Welcome, gamers, to this week's episode of Last Call Gaming. We're on episode 211. Today is March 14th. My name is Craig Perales, and joining me, as always, MANDREW Montemare.
Happy rainy days.
It is, dude. It's so funny because I was actually thinking, I'm like, you think it's starting to get like hot around this joint, and then the next thing you know, it's cold, it's rainy, and I'm like, oh, cool, because I got some couple new T-shirts that I've been wanting to like wear on the show, but I'm like, no, it's still cold enough to pop on a sweater.
No, hell no, it's freezing.
It's freezing out there. So, guys, if you're joining us on the YouTube show, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell. If you guys are interested in following us on our social media, our Linktree link in our Facebook group, link is in the description. And if you guys are listening to the audio-only version of this podcast, you can find it on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Anchor, whether that's iTunes, whether that's Spotify, what have you. So, with that being said, guys, let's get into our main story, our big story, and that is that Resident Evil is coming back with a new reboot to the film franchise, which is based off of the video game series by Capcom. It's been confirmed earlier this month that Sony has finally gotten the rights back to it, which was previously from Constantine, which they had, I believe, since 1997. Now, the movie doesn't have a lot going on it of what it's going to be about outside of the writer and director. So I kind of wanted to start with a background of the original movies, because what a lot of people kind of forget, and when I was kind of questioning myself, is like, the movies go back as far back as 2002, which is 20 years old at this point, and even the latest one that they had out of that series is still over 10 years old. So you might be young enough to not even know there were big Resident Evil movies, or old enough like us to where Resident Evil just kind of put a bad taste in your mouth. So even hearing the name Resident Evil coming back is going to kind of raise an eyebrow. So I figured we'd kind of start with some of the history just to kind of catch you guys up. So hang in there with me. So the original one was written and directed by Paul Anderson, and his, I believe then, is he still married to Mila Jovovich?
I don't know if they still are married, but they were married.
But they were married at the time. So
I think they are, though.
Okay, I think they are too. So they made 6. I'm just going to call them, so they made the first Resident Evil in 2002. I'm just going to call them RE after this. So Resident Evil in 2002, RE Apocalypse in 2004, RE Extinction in 2007, RE Afterlife in 2010, RE Retribution in 2012, and RE The Final Chapter in 2016. Now, the movies did fairly well. Collectively, they made over $1.2 billion. However, the movies were generally looked at by the critics pretty negative. So, but they did go on to, once upon a time, hold some records and still currently do. It was once the highest grossing film series based on a video game and the highest grossing horror film series. It is the highest grossing zombie film series, and the series retains the record for the most live action film adaptations for a video game. So I've only seen 1 or 2. I think you've seen most of them, if not all of them.
I've seen all of them.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, I mean, obviously they made money, so it's cool to think that it was making a 1.2 billion for a franchise. But do you think the issue that was, I mean, why weren't these movies loved? Because my first impression, I remember watching them back in the day, was like, oh, it's a new character. They make Alice, who's a former security specialist and a covert operative who battles the Umbrella Corporation. So for me, I was like, I don't like that it's not one of the game characters. But I find out reading that all the characters, all the big ones pretty much showed up. Claire Redfield, Jill Valentine, Ada Wong, Carlos Oliveira, Chris Redfield, Leon Kennedy, Barry Burton, and then as well as the antagonists, Wesker and Marcus. So in your mind, I mean, obviously they went the distance. They went for 10 years, but what was the issue and why weren't they generally loved?
I think where it really starts, if you ask like a lot of people, is after the second movie. Because the first 2 aren't terrible, and there might be some things like in the second one, Nemesis looks kind of dumb, but for the most part, they're a little more faithful to the game. Like the first one takes place in a mansion at the start, and then it goes into an underground facility lab, and that one's actually more of a horror movie and not really action. I was watching a thing for it the other day, like a little breakdown, and I didn't even realize going back and watching it, they don't see the zombies, you don't run into them, I don't think until it's like 40 minutes into the movie. Like you build up this suspense, and then once they come on screen, it's something I remember as a kid. And then the second one focuses on Raccoon City, of course, where it's all over the city. You're actually seeing the downfall of the city, which is something a lot of people like. That's where they have Jill. They do have the Nemesis. I think that's the big problem with that movie is Nemesis looks stupid, and there's some weird.
I was watching the fight scene of her versus the Nemesis.
It's bad.
It was good.
That I was like, some of the stuff like Mila Jovovich does in that movie, like wire running down a wall, but that's the biggest complaint. That one's a little more faithful, but after that is where it even though the games do it, it's not to a degree. I think the biggest problem with the rest of them is it just completely jumps the shark. At the end of that one, her character Alice gets these like weird psychic powers that like she can like make people bleed out of their nose and like stop things and do all kinds. It's just all kinds of weird powers
straight too far away
that don't make sense. And then even from there, after Raccoon City, I think it's the third one where pretty much all life on Earth has almost been like wiped out. So there's like a couple like little cities and things here and there. So it's not even a focus on that. There's just roaming zombies everywhere for whatever reason. And it's just too action. I mean, those movies really do focus on her character as Alice. So it almost seems like it's him building up his wife like over all these movies. And then they just have no direction for as far as like where their story's going to go, because at one point they're building up kind of her powers only just to take them away, and so then it makes her more human and you're like, okay, cool, like maybe I can kind of deal with that just to get them back like later on. That it's like, okay, like what the hell are we even doing with whatever. So I think after 2 is where it really goes bad, and again it's just I would say light horror, mostly action, and again, it just jumps the shark with all these just crazy-ass things, and the big problem is just the focus on her and what she can do versus, like, these people and these stories.
Yeah, and I mean, you gotta look at it. It's surprising that they let him and his wife do it for so long, because I'd also look, maybe it's fatigue, you know, just too much of writing of the same thing, the same voice. And also, we mentioned kind of the budget. Was the CGI just not there? Because one of the things you got to remember, from back in the day, in 2002, we're coming off of video game adaptations that were like Super Mario, Double Dragon, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, which was by Paul Anderson as well. But we're getting into 2001, 2002, where the first big bangers were Resident Evil and Lara Croft's Tomb Raider. So, and again, you had to have been there for the time, because if you go back and rewatch them, they will look cheesy. But I'm curious if maybe they just didn't have what it takes to, make zombies and Nemesis like more menacing.
I don't think that's a problem with some of the later ones. I think Nemesis, it would be like the first example. I think the zombies always look fine, but even in some of the later ones, I think it's the fourth one, they have, like from Resident Evil 5, there's the big Magini guys that carry like these axes and stuff like that. They actually look really good. And some of the other ones you see, like the lickers, I even like the design of the licker from like the first one. They even have the other like infected Ouroboros zombies that come out and they like, it's almost like Blade, where they have like the 4 like mandible style things or whatever. And I don't think that that's even a part of the problem. I think it's, again, it strays so far from everything. Whereas the first 2 were a lot more grounded and kind of kept, okay, the first one is in a mansion somewhat, even though it doesn't involve these other people. And the second one, you do see Jill fighting her way out of the city, even though it's more about Alice and her. She's at least a companion, and it's following what the game does, and then it just goes off, and the rest of them are only have like zombies and certain enemies, like even like Wesker's obviously completely different from what he's doing. And so it's in Resident Evil name only, plus a couple of these things like peppered in versus the overall idea of what some of these stories are.
Yeah, so it's interesting that it goes back as far as 20 years. That was kind of an eye-opener to think about. And recently they did try doing a reboot, but before that there was a couple other attempts they did at some stuff. What did you have written down?
They do have some of the like animated movies. The most recent one being Death Island. I think that one might have came out actually after the reboot. And I know a lot of people actually like those, even though they are like a little silly for what they are, but the game does have stuff like that. Like you have like, I think like the big meme is this dude and, I think it's like Leon fighting like zombies, and it's Chris and the protagonist, and they're fighting with guns, but they're like this close to each other doing like judo and like shooting and stuff like that, and it's just a hand to hand like trying to shoot
John Wick made it cool.
And it's stuff like that, but at least people enjoy it for what it is, because it's the characters and their situations that make sense within the confines of the game. Because I'm not going to act like the game has perfectly good writing, but at least this makes more sense than like, okay, well the planet's destroyed and there's nothing left, let's just pepper in whatever. You know, Leon's still a Secret Service person going out and doing whatever. Jill and Chris are doing the anti-terrorism.
But its timeline is after the games, though, right? Like this is actually after number 4.
Oh yeah. In these timelines,
these are actually tied to the games instead of being spin-offs.
They're tied to the games. I don't know that people consider them directly canon. I believe that they are.
Close
but
enough.
There are effects like when Leon meets Claire, or like when people meet each other. Oh, I haven't seen you since this or that, or something like that. Like you can tell that it hasn't been anything in a while. So they are interconnected, at least in tandem with the source material.
Especially when you're looking at even the character model, right? Leon looks like Leon from the game. Claire looks like Claire. So that's kind of what they did, and that really didn't. Were those reviewed well, or did those kind of stinker out?
I don't know that they were setting the world on fire, but people love those. They're far superior to the actual movies. So
with that being said, they did try rebooting Resident Evil once, and it was actually quite recently. It was Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, which actually came out on 2021. It's streaming on Stars if you guys are interested in it. And I will say that this one from the past franchise, this one does seem to stick much more faithfully to the games. I'd argue it's a solid B movie, but this time around they actually combined the first game and the second game and kind of put them together in a movie, and I actually like that a lot. I thought it captured the look, the feel, the tone, and the aesthetic of Resident Evil. But unfortunately, this movie made $42 million on a budget of $25 million, and it just didn't hit. What did you think of their first attempt at rebooting it?
I know that people do like it. I personally saw it in theaters, and I liked it.
Oh, you saw it in theaters? I don't remember even coming to theaters. No. When I saw it, I thought it was a straight to Venmo.
No, me and Christina both saw it in theaters, and we both really like it a lot. And again, that doesn't mean to say that there's not problems. Like, Leon's like a blundering idiot, I think, is the biggest thing. I think my biggest problem for these movies, what it really suffers from, is that it tries to combine too many things. You have 1 and 2, which are their own separate big stories, but little bits of 3 kind of in there, because now you have Claire involved in more than whatever, and then at the end of it, the city gets destroyed, so you don't even really leave room for 3. Sorry. So you're getting all this combined, and I think that's where it suffers from the most, versus where it would benefit from doing a 1, a 2, and then a 3.
Yeah, I watched it because I have played Resident Evil 1 and 2. I actually like the fact that they combined them. It does end with the end of 2 with the train scene. I think it was just under cast. Not saying that there wasn't good cast members in there. Robbie Amell's in it. Donald Logue's in it. Neil McDonough's in it. Fantastic. I think what they did is they didn't capture the characters. Because again, I think watching it, they do some even scene for scene, in the first Resident Evil when the zombie turns around after eating them.
The mansion is by far the best thing
they do. Some really cool stuff there. But I think when you're looking at it, I'd argue that you look at characters like Jill Valentine and Leon Kennedy, they were just completely misrepresented in that movie. Jill is kind of this lovey-dovey, following around Wesker kind of person, and Leon is this rookie that doesn't make any sense. Me and Sam were watching it together, and Sam, out of all the Resident Evil, she's beaten 4. So when I told her, I'm like, oh, this movie's going to be 1 and 2, you can kind of get a sense for, or let's see if they do a good job. She was watching it, and instantly she's like, that's not Leon Kennedy.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what do you mean? She's like, when you play him, he's a badass. First of all, you don't need to identify the look. Jill doesn't look like Jill, but capture the mannerisms and capture the way the person should be personified. And watching this character, and he's a good actor doing what he had to do, I suppose, but that was just not Leon Kennedy. And for me, I feel like for their first roll of the dice, they did a good job of getting it to look like Resident Evil. It felt like a B movie to me, but I just think what they keep missing out on is just nailing the characters. Because even when you watch the Mila Jovovich ones, I was watching some of the scenes, and I saw Ali Lauder, I think, plays Jill. I saw the person playing...
Ali Lauder is Claire.
It was Claire. And then I saw the person playing Chris Redfield was the guy from Prison Break. And I'm like, I still don't think you're embodying the right people.
The only people anyone love out of the original one is, and unfortunately I don't know her name, is the chick who plays Jill, because she's actually a really good Jill.
Okay, cool.
That's a standout for
played people. Claire?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it's unfortunate that when they did... I liked that they tried to do it, but unfortunately they did it on a $25 million budget, which is fairly well. That's not too high compared to today's budgets, but it didn't make that much. So anything else you want to say on the attempted reboot?
No, we can get into it a little bit later because I do have something that loops back into it, but keep going.
Okay, so, and then at the same time in 2021, they also had 2 other TV shows. They had an animated show in 2021 that was called Resident Evil Infinite Darkness, and this was, I believe, a canon story with Leon and Claire. I forgot to write down where you can watch it on. I remember watching that one.
That one was on Netflix.
It was on Netflix. That was pretty cool. And then Netflix also did another show, which was I don't know if you want to call it a reboot or still just a separate thing happening in the... No, I guess it would be a reboot because Albert Wesker's in it. Lance Reddick plays Wesker.
I don't think it's a reboot. I actually think it was meant to be like a continuation.
But Lance Reddick plays Wesker.
Yeah, I know, but he's like maybe he is. I don't think he's the original one. I think he might have been... I can't remember because the show wasn't the greatest thing.
Yeah, so that came out in 2022, most recently, and when it launched in July... I ended up finishing it. I didn't think it was bad. I think it had some merit, and then they could have done something more with it. But they instantly canceled it a month later in August, which was insane to do, especially with the money and the name. So I think for a lot of people, when you're hearing Resident Evil's coming back, you're looking back at this franchise 20 years ago that didn't do it, this reboot that just recently didn't hit the mark, and then if you are a newer player, let's say you're younger than me and Andrew, and you're playing these games, and the Resident Evil Netflix show was the first one you saw, and it's canceled in a month, there's no hint of this going like, why am I supposed to be jazzed up? And then we can dive into what's going on with the new reboot, but what else you got?
I was going to say, it actually is a continuation, I remember now, because they had the original Wesker show up in the black outfit with the hair, and then remember there's the other 3 clones that are there?
Right, but he's not black in the other ones, is he?
No, he's not. They just changed his race for whatever, just for that.
That's what I was thinking about reboot,
to play him.
Yeah.
But no, it is a continuation of that series. And I think part of the problem, too, from what it originally stemmed, and maybe why this new one did a little bit better, is you have to think about this time back then, too. After Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5 was just straight action, very little horror, and then 6 was just an amalgamation of things where a lot of people hate 6. They say that's one of the worst games, if not the worst game, because it just has such a big identity crisis of do we want to be horror, do we want to be action? It's mostly just action. Then they had the online shooter version that just wasn't good at all either. So... At then, maybe because it wasn't doing numbers, who knows if maybe that was part of why some of those movies were bad, and versus like, okay, well, if these games aren't doing the numbers like we think they should, then why even follow that story? Let's just kind of do our own thing versus follow that original trilogy that now Capcom, though, is out of that funk with the remake games that are absolutely setting the world on fire every time they come out. So
yeah, so Resident Evil does seem like it's slowly moving in the right direction. Obviously,
the games are.
The games are. Biohazard, it was 7, right?
Yeah.
And then 8 with Village, and then now the potential of 9 coming out. So Resident Evil, so if you were going to reboot it, that was a time when it's still kind of hot on the heels of the game. So with the new movie coming out, this is as much as we know so far. Deadline reports that Sony will release Kreger, which is Zach Kreger, director and writer, Resident Evil movie in theaters on September 18th, 2026, which is very soon. This move from Sony, which distributed all previous movies, comes after Warner Brothers was reportedly eyeing the film. Though no story details for the movie have been revealed just yet, the report notes that the film serves as a throwback to the original video game's horror roots. Kreger shared the following statement about his vision for Resident Evil. I've been a rabid fan of these games for decades, and to be able to bring this amazing title to life is a true honor. Producer Robert Kolzer of Constantine, which is producing and co-financing the movie, also commented on the adaptation, teasing a unique vision. The world of Resident Evil experienced through Zach's vision is an irresistible feat. Sanford Panich, president of Sony Pictures Motion Pictures Group, also called the film one of our most important releases for 2026, speaking to the company's excitement about the adaptation. Other producers on the project include Constantine's Robert Kolzer, Vertigo Entertainment's Roy Lee and Mira Yoon, and PlayStation Productions. So as cool as it sounds, because Zach Kreger is coming off of his big movie Barbarian, which was his first dabble into horror, which was up for quite a bit of awards.
Hit horror movie.
Yeah, hit horror movie. It seems that a lot of people, at least the most I could see, is that people are still nervous that Sony is on it, which I think Sony is recently doing a lot better with their movies and adapting their games to media, film, and shows. But the fact that Constantine is still on this after being part of the problem of the last few things they've done, so you hear what's happening. I mean, how do you like, director, how do you like who's still on it? What do you think is going to happen with this?
I'm definitely fine with Kreger, because I think people should get a chance.
A couple Kregers in the house.
And maybe he's got a fresh set of eyes, because I do like Barbarian. And again, that's not like a crazy over-the-top horror. It is a scary movie, but it's within a confined place, and it's like kind of slower. It's no, I watched that one at home.
Okay.
But it's not like an action movie or anything by any means, where you have just all these people going crazy or whatever. I think, I agree, the biggest problem, and what you'll see a lot of people's biggest problem is Constantine still being attached to this, because they have not absolutely done anything with any of the movies, and it seems like they're just so willing to let go and let someone else really have their vision. Because I actually even wrote down too, because I remember it being something at the time, and then reading about it when we were looking stuff up for the show, because originally Greg Russo was on board to do Welcome to Raccoon City, and he had whatever done as far as how the movie's going to go and his vision. And Constantine came in and just said, oh, well, we don't really care for kind of what you're doing. It doesn't sound good to us. Maybe we could throw in like time travel or something like that. That sounds cool. And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? You already have like a layout of how this story should go. It's done for you. It's been redone for you in modern years. How can you still not follow this plan? So he ended up leaving. You might know that name because he ended up doing, even though it's divisive, the newer Mortal Kombat movie. That's who ended up doing that one. They are also involved in the other flop that is from Capcom with Paul W.S. Anderson and, of course, his glorified wife in Mila in that Monster Hunter movie that came out.
Tanked.
Which absolutely tanked. I didn't even bother watching it, and I absolutely love Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is absolutely on fire right now. It is one of the biggest names, and you couldn't even do anything with that. And that's just a movie about hunting monsters that, but again, they just had to throw in whatever to think it's a good idea, and it just seems like everything they do, it's just too much meddling versus not in the right direction. Maybe not even suggestions like, okay, well, maybe we can do this or something in the right way. It's like you have the way that it's you have the blueprint. I just don't understand how hard it is to follow it. You don't have to make it one for one. I'm okay with changing some things, that's fine. But like when you're just going off the rails now.
Yeah. Well, it also seems too that Constantine, when you have the rights, you're able to put in your 2 cents and stuff your nose in the business. But I do feel a little more confident that Sony has the rights, and even though they're producing it with Sony behind it, you're definitely getting a bigger budget, so you're definitely going to have some more money to put behind it. And like I said earlier, I do think Sony is taking a bigger responsibility. Like, even if you look like something like Uncharted, love it or hate it, it did pretty well, and you can't tell me that it didn't look like Uncharted. So I do feel a little bit more confident. What I'm nervous about is, even though Zach Kreger is attached to it, this movie's fast, and there's nothing. Yes. It's not in production. It's not being written. There's no draft of it. So I have a bad feeling, as hyped as I am, that now it's in better hands with Sony per se, and you have a good person that's doing the writing and the direction. I have a bad feeling that in 3 months we're gonna be like, oh nope, new director, and it's gonna be some guy that made fucking Madam Web. Or it's going to be the guy that made Craven over at Sony Pictures.
My biggest hope for it, and maybe why it could be fast to where I'm leaving it open, is Barbarian just takes place mostly like in a house. Whereas in Resident Evil 1, it just takes place in a mansion. It's not like you have to go out and film on location here and there. You're not Resident Evil 2 stage yet, where you're filming a whole city spanning blocks and districts and whatever. Not to mention, when you watch Welcome to Raccoon City, and I'm sure you could probably agree with this, hands down, one of the best parts of that movie is, spoilers, is when they're in the mansion.
Yeah.
It's absolutely one of the best parts too, especially because it makes you feel, I never really thought about it before, you play the games and the hallways are a little tight, but watching that on screen, I'm like, man, they really do put it into perspective how claustrophobic some of these hallways would be in a mansion, and it's
how easy fast to get ganged up on.
It's easy to get overwhelmed like that. Not to mention, one of the best scenes, I think, for a horror or even zombie movie is when you can't even see how dark it is because there's no light in some of those areas, so all you can see is with his little lighter or from the flash of his gun. I absolutely love that part. They killed that if you give me a movie of that, how long could it take? I'm no director or anything like that. I don't know, but how long could it take to film a mansion area? That's again why I think you need to, in my personal opinion, stick to one. If you're going to combine two of them, maybe do a little bit of Zero into there, because Zero is the prequel. Rebecca Chambers does show up in Zero, and then the ending of that leads specifically into one. That would be fine, but do not try to do 1 and 2, because now you're doing a standalone event that happened, and then months later a giant city-ending event.
Well, I was going to say too, I kind of went back. We're about to move on to our story, but I did want to ask you this. It says the film serves as a throwback to the original video game's horror roots. It's questionable to say that because he hasn't written anything. So with that being said, do you think he's going to try to do one of the older games, or do you think he's going to do 7 and 8, something on those, or do you think it's going to be like Mila Jovovich is in a whole new thing entirely?
I think if
what would you want in order?
I think if they are rebooting it, they have to go back and just do like 1, 0, even just do 2, and don't do 1 if you don't want to have something in a mansion. You could just have someone. You could just pick up. Everybody knows the story of it. A lot of the people who see it are going to whatever. So you could go and read it in a newspaper passing, or even at the beginning, like the games do sometimes. Like, this happened months ago, and this and that, and now whatever, we're in the city. That would be fine. So preferably, I would rather them go back and just do like 1 or 2 or something like that. 7 and stuff is just later. I wouldn't rather them start with that. And the last thing I would want them to do is to just completely, it's our own idea. It's starring in Las Vegas, Nevada now, and it's a zombie outbreak, and Jill and Chris are there, and Chris is a fucking air show pilot, and Jill is writing for the Evil Knievel convention or something.
Right on, guys. So that is as much as we know so far. I thought it was a good idea to kind of go back and remind people of what Resident Evil has been through. Because, again, if a lot of people kind of forget those movies and the animated ones and the shows that got canceled and the recent reboot. I completely forgot about that reboot until Andrew reminded me the other day, and I watched it. I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot they made this. So as of right now, I do think it seems to be in good hands. But until I start hearing that there's a draft in order and they're working on the script, then I'll be comfy cozy. But as of right now, for me, I'm still like, I think something bad might just happen. So, anything else on Resident Evil?
No, I'm ready to move on.
Alrighty, guys. So, with our second main topic is Last of Us Season 2 is coming. It'll arrive on HBO Max on April 13th, 2025. We just got a big new trailer, and the hype is pretty big so far. A lot of people may think that it kind of fell off, but yeah, I mean, as soon as because there was a couple trailers that launched, and then there was one big one that just came out a couple days ago, and it set some records. So this comes from Deadline. It says, momentum for the second season of HBO's The Last of Us is clearly building. Per Warner Brothers Discovery, the trailer released Saturday as part of the show's South by Southwest panel amassed 158 million global views across platforms in just the first 3 days, which is a record for HBO and Max originals. The new trailer outperformed previous trailers and teasers for The Last of Us, which was season 1, by a margin of at least 160%, the company said. To date, episodes of Season 1 are averaging around 32 million cross-platform viewers in the U.S. That's about 4 times the same-day audience of the Season 1 finale, which set the record for same-day viewership with 8.2 million across platforms. It's still among HBO's biggest shows in recent years, which sets the stage nicely for the debut of Season 2 next month, meaning that with this trailer coming on, people are going back and re-watching Season 1. So just to dig a little further, just to show how good that is, it's not just even for HBO. If you're looking at worldwide trailers and ranks with 158 million, overall it sits at the number 12 most viewed trailer behind Lion King, which was at 174 million, and Avengers Infinity War at 179. So it's definitely clear that people are ready for this to come. But the two things that are kind of being talked about sideways are what's going to keep happening with the show, as well as the game series that it's derived from. And do you want to talk about the trailer at all first, or do you just want to get in some talk about speculation about the season and the game?
I would just do a trailer and then go into game.
Okay, because the trailer looks cool. Obviously, this is when you get to see Abby now coming in, and I try my best not to watch too much of it, because even the smallest thing in this can kind of ruin something. So I would say, if you're already hype on it, I would say maybe skip the trailer, because it's going to be coming out in a month. So, but it did a really good job. Obviously, it shattered records. It was very well done, and I'm clearly looking forward to it. I thought it was very well put together.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at it again earlier. On HBO just alone, so not cumulative trailers from everywhere else, it's already sitting at like over 24 million views. I think, too, and this is something Capcom, again, could learn from, is this adaptation has been very faithful to the game. They do take some liberties, but it doesn't just go off and do all this crazy ass stuff. It's stuff that makes sense within the confines of the world. And as if you're someone who was trying to be like a purist or something like that, and you don't want to watch the trailer, then you can go ahead and skip it. But if you played the game, I will say that a lot of this trailer is almost like a beat for beat of moments within the game. And I'm like, oh, okay, like, obviously I've seen this and I know certain things that are going to happen, but it looks really, really good.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to point out, Andrew and I, when we actually beat, Andrew came over, spent the night, and we actually passed the controller back and forth and beat,
over like 2 days,
Last of Us Part 2. So, with that being said, again, guys, there's the show and the games, and one of the biggest things to remember, especially if you're looking at how pure it's going to be, is Last of Us Season 2, it is going to be broken up into two parts, which they're saying is going to carry over into essentially a Season 3, and they've also been on record saying that plans for the show they have ideas that are going to go past that. Obviously, this adds Abby, which is more or less a co-protagonist of the story in her own right, but at the same time also going to be hunting Ellie. So when you're looking at if the idea is going to be that it's going to be this bigger 2-season event, there's obviously some big story beats, and we won't ruin anything, won't spoil anything for you if you haven't played the game. But something really big happens in it, and they're clearly going to be pushing that back. So
yeah, it's almost towards the start of the game within the first couple hours.
Yeah, so by definition, this is going to be a new and different stories. You know, how long are they going to push that back, which moves it into a different direction from the game? Obviously, there's going to be beats and things like that, but I wanted to point out what Variety, they had an article about it, and it touches on it as well as kind of the game. It says, how much longer, and the article is a lot more if you guys want to check it out. It's the Variety article with Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin. How much longer The Last of Us could continue, meanwhile, remains an open question. Mazin and Druckmann always plan to split Part 2 into more than one season. They're just not sure how many more there will be. It feels like we've got 1 or 2 more seasons, Mazin says. It's getting harder to make because every episode gets bigger. You don't want to wait 4 years for a 17-episode finish or whatever it is. Then there's a long whispered possibility of The Last of Us Part 3. And Druckmann goes on to say, I was waiting for this question. Druckmann says, sighing when I bring it up at the prospect of a third game. I guess the only thing I would say is don't bet on there being more of Last of Us. This could be it. No matter the show's long-term prospects with the renewal all but guaranteed from HBO, Mazin and Druckmann will soon start their process all over again. So a lot of people took this as concern of saying, well, what does he mean? Does that mean that there's going to be no Last of Us Part 3? And are they going to continue the journey, albeit in a new direction with, you know, future seasons of the show? So if you are, and it's really not clear at this point, because if you guys remember, Naughty Dog also has Intergalactic, which is coming, and it's already canceled The Last of Us Online. So they've already got a slate of going on for the games. It's kind of curious of going now if they do make a game, and I'm kind of pointing this question if you want to get in it, is will the game still be its own thing after game 2, or do you think now game 3 might be derivative of the show on how maybe the way they're going to end it or continue that story?
I think it depends.
Or is that too confusing? Or do you think there's even going to be a game at all?
If there is another game, I don't think it's going to be for a while, especially depending on how Intergalactic does. But if for whatever reason that game doesn't turn out well, I think it's a pretty safe bet to be like, okay, well, we need to put out The Last of Us 3, and then we can go ahead and do something else. So I think it's a little bit dependent on that. And I guess it depends on how far they get with the show, because if the show gets further
than some Game of Thrones type things happening.
Then how the game ended. I'm sure maybe if they, because he works on it with them, so there might be some story beats that he might take, but I think the game would probably end up its own thing. And I like the idea too of like what they're saying, like you don't want to wait 10 years for whatever. I don't even want to see it turn into almost like how like The Walking Dead went on, where like it started off really good and then there's a big dip in quality, and then it's just like, okay, well, I don't really care for this anymore, and now it's something that's like 12 seasons long, but there's like 5 different shows.
Spin-offs.
I love something that's just got a definitive beginning and a definitive ending that doesn't take me 10 years to get through. I think that makes for a lot stronger and more compelling story than to keep trying to, you know, drag on.
Yeah. He says also, I believe it was this interview, that he goes, you know, what made it special is the story we were able to tell. And when people keep asking, that, we want more of it. We want more of it. He goes, people lose sight of it. That more of it loses what made it special in the first place. So there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to make probably season 4 and 5 with The Last of Us. And that could even be a spin-off point, because what I've always thought was interesting with outbreaks and things like this is you can tell a season from a different point and do something new with it with new characters. It doesn't have to be Joel, Ellie.
That's what I was about to say.
Abby. Yeah. So I think they're going smart with that direction. I'm not sure what they're going to do with Last of Us Part 3. Honestly, I don't think you need it. I think games 1 and 2 are fine. But if I were to say over under 60% right now, I'd probably still say over, that they are going to end it. I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I would say in the next 5 years.
I think if they do make another game, personally for me, I would prefer it to end on 3. Just a nice little trilogy to maybe button up some stuff. But I feel like part of the problem that people want is based on the ending without saying anything, is people want like a definitive ending, whereas when you're like, whether it be happy or be sad, whereas the way this thing ended is the way a lot of in that situation within that world makes perfect sense, to where you don't know what's going to happen because everything's just so fucked up that it's in such an unsure state that, like, do you really need that definitive? I could just leave it at what it was and either picture a happy or sad ending for myself, or whatever. Like, why do I need to have more of this?
Yeah, and I'd also say too is that with all the work they put into doing the remasters that were still on previous generations of systems, and how good they want to make it to look, I think also the next game, I think they might be waiting for some new tech, right? I think the game 100% wouldn't be coming out on the PS5. I think it'll probably be towards mid or the end of the PS6 if and all we get it. So it's a safe bet to say I don't think it's coming out on the PS5 anytime soon. PS6 would probably be the spot that if we get it, that's when it comes out.
No, and like you said, I think it's especially going to be highly dependent on how Intergalactic does.
Yeah, because who knows that they're going to make us 2 of that. So, got anything else you want to add on Last of Us? I can't wait to do it. I don't know, maybe... I don't know if you watch it with CC, but it'd be cool if we do like a watch party or something like that. I think that'd be kind of a cool show to do.
Yeah, maybe me and her can come over here and watch it. We do definitely love that show. We watched that whole thing together, so.
Yeah, that's a day one banger. So guys, if you've got any thoughts on Resident Evil and the reboot, or your hype for The Last of Us Season 2, definitely guys, leave down in the comments and let us know. So, we appreciate that you made it to the end of the episode. So now you get to know... Andrew and I want to do what are you up to? When Andrew and I take a second and talk about anything we've been playing, anything we've been watching. I'll like to go first on this one. So, what I've been doing, I'll start with watching. We'll start with what I've been watching. So, earlier when I was doing show notes and I took a break, Sam came home. She was off by 1. She was a little early. So, what I ended up watching was Zach Krager's Barbarian.
Oh, nice.
Which came out in 2022. It's streaming on Hulu. I was doing all these notes, and I kept reading that everyone was impressed with Barbarian and his adaptation into horror. So I was like, it was like 3-something. No, it was 1 when she was getting off, and then by the time I was getting ready to watch it, I was looking, I'm like, I got time to, because I was I got done by 3:40. And I'm like, I got time, then I can still finish the show. So I'm like, let me take a peek at it. Popped it on. We watched it. I'll say this. This guy knows how to deliver the look and the feel of what I think would carry over to making an awesome Resident Evil. The suspense was fantastic, and let me see if I have what it is here, because I wanted to read what it was about so you guys have some knowledge of what it is. It's this girl essentially goes to this Airbnb, and she meets up with a stranger who actually booked it at the same time. And then you find out that there's some creepiness going down in this basement and cellar type area. And I thought he matched it 100%. What I didn't like about it is I think his character development seemed a little bit of wasted time and took a little too long. Getting to know Justin Long's character for me was just like, okay, this is a little too much. But with that being said, and I won't spoil anything, I thought what he was able to do was capture Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. If they were to make that because after watching it, I was like, man, the downstairs basement is exactly like the house. What you get to see eventually, which is really cool below it, matches that kind of theme. So for me, I was like, if he's saying throwback to, and I wanted to bring it up earlier, if he's doing a throwback to the old games, I hope he means it in terms of the horror. Because if he was going to do it, I think we've seen enough of Leon and Jill and Chris and Wesker that I think 7 and 8 would be a cool thing to do a new story. Simply for the terms that after watching Barbarian, I was like, man, this matches that tone. So if you guys are curious of what Zach Krager's been up to, check out Barbarian on Hulu. That's what I've been watching. As far as what I've been playing, I started Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, which is a 2025 action-adventure game developed by RGG Studio and published by Sega. It's a spin-off of Like a Dragon, the Like a Dragon series. It came out on February 21st, 2025. Now, I've started Yakuza. I wanted to do it faithfully, and I started with 0. And
at least beat 0.
And I'm on 1. But I was in a slump. Last episode, I was saying that I wanted to play Shadows of Mordor or Shadows of War. And I started it, and I was moving along. It's just, it wasn't the action I was looking for, and I will keep playing it. It's just there was a lot going on, and then I was like, let me check out. I was gonna play Dishonored 2, and I'm like, it's a little too slow for me at the moment. So I didn't want to act like a poser and play more Yakuza out of order. But I feel like if you're going to jump into anyone, this one seems the one that's the most detached from it. And the action is clearly, when I got into it, because I've listened to a couple other gaming podcasts, and they all kept raving about how good the combat was.
So good.
And Andrew, I know, loves it. So I watched another trailer. I'm like, you know what? That looks kind of like the combat I want. Started playing it. I'm at the end of Chapter 2. I've been to the Pirate Coliseum. We're now the Goro Pirates, and we've got the stance. I've recruited all my guys. My ship's prepared. I'm building it up. I've upgraded my cannons and guns. So for me, I can't wait to finish it, and hopefully I can get it done by next week. But that's what I've been watching, and that's what I've been playing.
You liking the naval combat?
It's refreshing. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a tad stale. I like that it's simplified, but it's not boring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's easy enough to do. I was picking up, I'm like, man, I don't want to learn ship mechanics. I don't want to do this, that, and the other. It's got a real nice, clear path of where you got to go. The map systems are kind of like, I don't say biomes, they're like sections. Instead of literally circling across the world like you would in like Black Flag, you can skip to these points and then
more streamlined
and just kind of do that. So I thought it was fantastic. I love doing. You can ram into them, you can shoot your cannons and your railguns, and then now I'm at the point where I can board ships and start taking out the leaders and things like that. So I'm having a fantastic time so far.
I haven't been watching anything because I've been playing a lot of stuff. I actually finished Pirate Yakuza, loved it, and then just as like a little palate cleanser because I needed something else in the interim, I went through and smashed Sniper Elite 5. I talked about Sniper Elite Resistance. It's pretty much almost like the same game, just a prequel. A lot of the same stuff plays the same, so it's really good. If you're looking for something, I'll take it slow, but once hell breaks loose or someone finds me, I just go all out with the guns and go crazy on there. It was a lot of fun, and I beat it like fairly quick too. I think I beat it in almost like 2 days and maybe like 3-hour sessions.
I was going to ask, because I was watching a trailer. It says there's online combat. I know you talked about it in the last game. Is it just not as popular as it should be, or do you think it's like, why doesn't nobody play it? Why don't I hear about it?
I think you'd have to really kind of play it to understand. Like, it's very niche. Like, when you do the online multiplayer, the team v team, it's like a third person, almost like maybe like classic like Metal Gear shooting. Okay. So like when you're crouching around, stuff like that, it's just not fast paced. And I think that's what a lot of people look for. Versus when you have a big competitor like Rainbow Six Siege or something like that. Once you play it, if you played it even just a single player, as far as how you play the single player goes, that translates exactly to the multiplayer. You will get a better idea and you kind of understand. Because if I say it just sounds a little abstract.
Gotcha.
And then as far as what I've really been sinking my time into is Monster Hunter Worlds. I got or Wilds. I put MHW and I always say Worlds. Wilds, excuse me. Thank you. I am absolutely loving it. At first, I kind of was like just really like bummed out because I'm like, dude, this is just not what I'm wanting. Because there are certain parts, it's very beginner friendly for people who have not played the games before. And I'm no expert, so I started with Worlds. I did Monster Hunter Rise. I did do Iceborne. I didn't do Sunbreak, the DLC for Rise. So I'm fairly new. I haven't played the old ones like Generations or anything like that. So, but again, there's sections where like there's cutscenes. There's a lot more story now than there was ever before, and I don't mind that. But what really kills me is there's this like whiny ass kid that's on it. But two, like when you're doing, instead of finding some of these monsters naturally, or just roaming around or doing whatever you're doing, like how you do on the first one, you kind of hunt them down. You're almost riding through and like, oh no, now this guy's blocking our way and we gotta do whatever. Versus in the old one, sometimes you're just out looking around for stuff and then that's how you're supposed to run into the monster. It seems like that's, you do some of that stuff later on is where that's introduced. The big problem for me, like I said, is you're forced into like a ride along, so you're riding on your sacred, which is your bird, and you're following these people and you're talking to them the whole time. You're going across the landscapes, and I'm like, dude, just let me go from A to B, and we can talk about whatever later. Like that, I want to be out here exploring. I don't want to be riding on this ride along with you. It just feels, like you're on a roller coaster. Like you can kind of swivel a little bit, but you can't. You're just stuck on this path, and that to me was just driving me absolutely insane. But I did pass the credits, which is. It's not considered the end of the game, but that's, I would say, almost like tutorial style, because now I'm done with all the low rank stuff. I'm doing high rank stuff. I'm not crazy high right now. I'm only high rank 37 right now. I know there's some people out there who are just absolutely tearing this game up, and I'm like 300, but I'm cruising and making my way to like what's considered like the real end game. So I'm getting there, and after I got to like the harder stuff and the more challenging monsters, where now they're like more aggressive, and there's a lot more like turf wars where the monsters are fighting, and so you're getting interrupted and actually having to plan your stuff out, whether it be your armor, what weapons you're using, or do I have something to separate the monsters, because now there's 3 of them over here fighting and I really just need the one guy, so I gotta find a way to get rid of some of these other 2. So there's just a lot more of that hunting aspect to it that I'm just back in love, dude. I like, even every night this night, I've been playing till almost like 1, 2 in the morning. I've been playing till like 1 or 2 in the morning. And I do want to give a special shout out to my cousin AJ, because he actually bought this for me as a present for having a kid. So thank you very much. I'm absolutely loving this game. And what's even cooler too is I ran into a friend at the store the other day that I hadn't seen or really like talked to in a while. You fall out with, or not fall out, but you kind of fall away from some people. He's like, we were talking for a while. He's like, oh, you playing? I was like, yeah, I'll add you on Discord. I've been playing with him and one of my other friends, like these were like my best friends for years that I went to school with, and I've been playing with them almost like every night and just talking, and it's almost like
Collins? Where's Collins at?
I don't know where he is, bro. I don't know where you're at. I've been writing you, dude. You're too busy on that East Coast time. So I'm playing with these dudes, and it's just like catching up, and it's almost like things like never left.
That's cool.
You're just having nights with the boys again, and again, it's refreshing for me, especially somebody who plays Call of Duty every single night, and then I play my single player stuff by myself. It's nice to have a game that's nothing like Call of Duty and nothing like anything else I'm playing, that I'm having this time to play with my friends, and it's so much fun. I would say too, personally, if you're somebody who's been a little wary of Monster Hunter because maybe it's too hard, there's too much to learn, this is the most, I don't mean like beginner where it's going to hold your hand, but it is fairly easy to get in and understand and figure it out and jump in. And I think you should definitely maybe give it another go, and I can help you out, because I think it's something that once you get in there, like, it just keeping its core values, it's so good, and I love it.
Nice. How many hours did you say got you to roll credits the first time without doing the back end stuff? Under 30?
I think maybe like 15, maybe less than that. Like you can cruise through it pretty quick. It took me a little bit longer because, again, I do start hunting other stuff, and even though I didn't have to, I'm like getting my armor sets and everything like that before I want to move on. Plus, not to mention, I brought it up before because it is kind of nice sometimes to do too. I'll do solo if I have to, but you can like fire off a flare that even if other players don't join your world, it does bring in these other CPU players that are actually fairly competent. If not, at the very least, they will draw attention from the monster, so that way you can heal or be fighting it while they're focused on somebody else. So it is almost like playing with somebody else. But again, you can play by yourself completely if that's more what you're into.
Nice. So guys, tons to play, tons to do, guys. Thank you for joining us. That is the end of episode 211. Join us next time on episode 212. And until next time, guys, my name is Craig Perales. This handsome bloke is Andrew Montemayor. Cheers.
See you in the wilds.